yes, I was the Thomas. We never did figure out where Thomas came from, but my middle name is Francis. I'm named after my mother. My mother was Francis. All the way through school, I hated Francis because everybody thought I was a girl. And I had to say, wait a minute, it's Francis with an I, not Francis with an E. That's how I grew up so tough, because I had to fight my way through grade school, defending my middle name. DeLand, Florida. My dad was the dean of the Stetson Law School, so he and my mom moved down from Iowa. When they moved down, they came down with a tent and pitched their tent in the town square because they didn't have any place to live. So for a week they lived in a tent in the center of town until they could find a place to stay. And he took over at the law school and eventually became the dean, and I was born there in DeLand. We later moved here to West Palm Beach. I tell everybody I'm from the Northeast, but DeLand is just northeast of here. It's still in Florida, of course. One of my dad's students was Jim Nemick, and Jim he was one of the ones that talked us into coming down here to West Palm Beach. And he always bragged to people that he used to change my diapers. So that was the thing he was most proud of, is that he changed Tom Raymond's diapers. From law school, he borrowed $5 from my dad because he didn't have a penny to his name. And he eventually moved here and became quite wealthy. He was a Palm Beach attorney. Did a lot of work with real estate. We used to go to Iowa every summer.
Okay.
And we would help. That's where I learned to drive. When I was 12 years old, I learned to drive a tractor. And I managed, they were sorry that they turned me loose on the tractor. One day I made a turn that was too sharp, but we had a big load of hay. Well, it must have been, men had been working for hours loading the hay. And I made too sharp a turn and dumped the whole load out in the field, and they had to reload it. But we used to help with the threshing and helped spread the manure on the fields. And one of my cousins one day said, "Oh, you know what a fun thing?" That was the Brames. The Brames had 4 daughters. And that was the thing I used to brag about when I got home. I said I used to get to sleep with my cousins, my 4 female cousins. And their big thing was, hey, the fun thing we're going to do tomorrow is we're going to clean out the chicken coop. This is the fun thing to do. So we'd spend the whole morning digging chicken manure and then taking it out and spread it in the field. That was a Tom Sawyer deal they pulled on me. The fun thing to do was to spread the manure. But we used to do that every summer. We would get on the train and take the train all the way to Iowa. I'd go from Miami. We'd go from Miami to Chicago and then take another train from Chicago to Cedar Rapids. And then somebody would pick us up and we'd go out and spend 2 weeks working on the farm.
How long did the train take? Do you remember?
It was probably a 24-hour trip.
That's crazy. And it was your cousins that lived out there, or was it your grandparents?
We would stay with my mother's parents in Van Horn.
Okay.
But sometimes we'd stay with my father's parents in Garrison. But my mother's parents in Van Horn, they're only 10 miles apart. But the Van Horn house was bigger. It was a 2-story house with a big attic we used to play in, and had a big garden, lots of fresh vegetables. The Raymond grandparents had a smaller house. Eventually, they moved in a house that was an old schoolhouse that they had moved. In fact, they moved it when we were up there one summer. They moved it down the road with a tractor, pulled the house up the road about a mile to put it in the spot that they were going to live in. And then for water, we had to go out in the yard and pump water out of the ground with a hand pump. That was the only water we had. Well, we moved from DeLand in 1941, or about 1940, I guess. My dad took a job as an assistant attorney general in Tallahassee. So we moved from DeLand to Tallahassee. And then when the war broke out, he volunteered for the Navy. And we moved to Miami for 3 years during the war. And then from there, we moved up to New York City for 3 months in the summer of '45. And then from there, we moved to Daytona in August or September, I guess, of '45.
So which house for you feels most like your childhood home?
Would have been the house in Daytona Beach.
Okay. So what was that house like?
That was a big house with a big yard. And we lived on what now is the main thoroughfare, the Halifax Drive, but we used to play baseball right in the middle of the road. We would set up bases and we would play in the road, and every once in a while we'd have to move to let a car pass by. But now the people there can't even get out their driveway because there's so much heavy traffic on that road.
That's crazy.
But we lived right on the Halifax River and had a boat. We used to row out in the water. Had a 5-horse Evinrude that we used to take out fishing. And we used to water ski right out there in front of the house. And we were just 3 blocks from the beach. We had an old 1934 Chevrolet that had a 200-foot rope behind it, and we used to water ski on the beach. We'd drive up and down the sand on the beach for 10 miles and water ski behind the car. There was nobody on the beach. We'd go 10 miles without seeing anybody. My favorite teacher was Mrs. Kemp in the 5th grade. Somehow or other she thought I was smart and I thought I should skip the 6th grade. So that's how I wound up a year ahead of myself. So I went from 5th grade to 7th grade without taking the 6th grade. And then she was my teacher again in history in 8th grade, but math was always my favorite subject. But I don't know that I had any other favorite teacher. My favorite coach was Coach Joe Nelson. He was our basketball coach. But the thing that we used to tease about was he never heard any profanity from him. One time we were playing tennis with him after I graduated from high school, and he hit a bad shot and he said, "Oh, C-U-R-S-C. That's the worst thing I ever heard him say." He was a great coach.
That's so funny. Do you remember what you liked specifically about Mrs. Kemp?
Just that she was very personable and friendly, and just a person that was easy to know and easy to get along with. For fun, we used to go camping with the Boy Scouts, and we used to play golf and tennis. We'd spend a lot of time on the beach swimming and surfing, and we'd go out in the boat fishing. And my best friend was probably Jack Pickett. Jack died several years ago from acute leukemia, but he used to take me out on his motorcycle. Or not a lot of times, but a couple times we went on his motorcycle. But my parents never liked that very much. I don't suggest you do that. Bad idea. Don't do any motorcycling. We used to go down they used to have the races down at the south end of Palm Beach, or down the south end of Daytona Beach, where we would take the boat down and we would sneak up through the mangrove swamps and we could get into the races for free. And we would watch the cars go. They would go 2 miles on the road and then 2 miles on the beach, making an oval. I don't remember any favorite toys. When I was in 3rd grade, I had a paper route in Miami. I had 45 customers, and I used to go and pick up my papers and then drive back or ride back and distribute all the papers. And right then it was 30 cents a week for the subscription, and I got to keep 5 cents of that. So
You got paid 5 cents a week?
5 cents a week per customer.
Okay.
So for 40 customers, I would get $2. So it was big money in those days.
That's crazy. What could you buy with $2?
Well, my mother wouldn't let me spend any of that. She told me that was my college money. She caught me spending 5 cents on a Coke one time, and she really gave me a tongue lashing. She says, "That's not money to be wasted. That's your hard-earned money, and you're saving that for college."
Wow.
So I wasn't allowed to spend any money.
That's crazy. And was that something your parents made you do the paper route, or did you want to do that?
That was, I'm sure, was their suggestion.
Yeah.
When I was later in Daytona, I had an option of taking a paper route, and I turned it down very quickly. Although my mother said, "Hey, that would have been a good idea." I had already had the paper route experience. The best gift I've ever received is that pool cleaner you guys gave me a couple years ago. That automatic pool cleaner that goes around the pool and sweeps up all the dirt. That's my favorite of all time.
Okay.
Probably the 20s, from 20 to 30. So beginning with med school and until the three kids were born.
Cool.
Well, let's see. I was in New York when the plane crashed into the Empire State Building. That was in August of 1945. And I was in Coney Island when the Second World War ended. My dad was in New York retraining to go to China. And we dropped the second atomic bomb on Nagasaki. And they announced the end of the war when we were on Coney Island. We got on the subway and went into Times Square. And I saw millions of people right there in Times Square. You've seen lots of pictures of that. If you look carefully, you can see me in the middle of 3 million people.
I'll have to look carefully next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, you can find me there. Let's see, what else? The Cuban Missile Crisis disrupted our wedding plans. What else? The beginning of the war, December 7th, 1941, I remember that.
Do you remember where you were when you...
Yeah, I was up playing in the dirt in Tallahassee. Had some play cars that I was dragging around in the clay when the war ended, when the war began. That's when my dad volunteered to go in the Navy.
How did he tell you about the war?
I think I just remember they were saying that the war started. I don't remember anything specific other than that,
Yeah.
because I was only 6 years old. Oh, it wasn't any big elaborate ceremony. It wasn't like me proposing in the middle of a big, with everybody watching. No, I think what I said would you like to go to Japan with me? That was the initial proposal. Then later on, when we were in Daytona, she made me get down on my knee in the beach and ask her to marry me. I guess that was the official proposal. I don't think I was in on that. I think Grandma picked all the names. Bob was named after Grandma's brother. Kelly was just a name that Grandma has always liked. Pat, just a name that popped up. I don't know that has any significance.
Okay. Well, my next question was, did you get an allowance? But I feel like that you did not get an allowance.
No, I never had an allowance.
So you just never buy anything?
I don't remember ever buying anything, no.
That's so wild.
I guess I've repressed those memories. Surely I got in trouble sometime, but I can't remember.
What kind of kid, what were you like as a kid?
What was I like?
Yeah.
Well, I was always interested in athletics. So I was always into sports, baseball, football, basketball, track. So I was always doing something athletic. And in those days, we didn't have any air conditioning. So we were never inside. We were always outside. Even in Miami during the summer when we didn't have any air conditioning, we were always outside. Because there was no place to be cool. It was cooler outside than in. So we were always outside playing. And usually it was baseball or football or just running around. Oh, one time we did get in trouble in Miami. Would have been about 1943. The police came to check on us because we'd been out at the railroad and we had been watching movies about the underground attacking the Nazis in Germany. So we were out attacking the railroad with our wooden machine guns. And we would wait in the bushes until the train came out, and we'd bring out our Tommy guns, and we'd attack the train with our wooden Tommy guns. So they reported us, and the police came to tell us that wasn't a good idea.
That's so funny. Do you remember how old would you have been, 1943?
I would have been 8. That would have been when we moved here to West Palm Beach. We bought a house down on Superior Place that had air conditioning, whole house air conditioning, but the house in Daytona had no air conditioning. And when I lived in Gainesville, we had no air conditioning. When I went to University of Florida, and even when the hospitals here didn't have air conditioning until about 1968. Hospitals were very hot in the summers. So that was a huge change when air conditioning came in.
Yeah. Do you remember just being like, this is the best thing ever?
Oh yeah. In Philadelphia, at the Hospital University of Pennsylvania, that would have been 1959. We had big open wards with no air conditioning. It was so hot. And they eventually got air conditioning, and it was a huge change.
Is that dangerous for infection, it being hot like that, or not really?
Not for infection, but old people don't tolerate heat well. We see people with heat exhaustion. Oh. It was a problem keeping cool. I met Grandma at the hospital. She was a physical therapist, and I had a patient in the rehab unit. I was taking care of the medical conditions, and she was doing the physical therapy.
Do you remember what you first thought of her when you first saw her?
I said, this gal's cute and has a cute smile. Yeah, I said, we've got to give this one a trial. So
she told me that you called her and asked her on a date. Do you remember where you took her?
We went to a party. One of the interns was giving a cocktail party, and it was downtown Philadelphia. And we went, and she had one cocktail, and then she had trouble getting to the bathroom. I had to help her up the stairs to get to the bathroom because she wasn't used to cocktails. In fact, she probably only had half a cocktail. So I said to myself, this is going to be a cheap date. So that was a plus. When what?
When you knew you loved Grandma?
Oh, that would have been about the second date.
Really? What was it where you were like?
I took her out to dinner someplace. I think we went out to dinner in New Jersey, a nice place for dinner. I forget the name of it, but we had a nice time.
And was it that date where you knew you were going to marry her?
Yeah, that was about the third date.
That's so crazy.
That was in Itazuki Air Base, Japan. And our best man was Don Sherline. Don and I met when we were going through basic training in Montgomery, Alabama. And we flew over to Japan together on courtesy of the Air Force. And we were best friends for many years. He just died a couple years ago from kidney failure. But he was our best man, and we had a big wedding planned to be in Philadelphia. And Grandma had everything all lined up, invitations all had gone out. And I don't know how many 100 people or so invited, lots of bridesmaids. And then the Cuban Missile Crisis came up, it was 1962, and I wasn't allowed to leave the base, so we had to scuttle the whole plan. And she gathered up her wedding gown and flew over to Japan by herself, and we had set up an impromptu wedding. Had about 100 guests. Nobody that Grandma knew, and had a nice wedding right there in the Air Base Chapel, with a reception afterwards at the Officers Club. We actually got married 3 times. We had to get married first at the American Embassy, and then we had to go down to the Japanese City Hall. And then the 3rd wedding was the religious ceremony on base.
That's kind of cool. So if someone were to go to that same city hall, your records are probably there
They're still
somewhere.
there in Japanese, yeah.
That's so cool.
So I tell everybody that this is my 3rd wife.
First 2 is the same girl, but this is my 3rd wife.
Oh, they loved her right from the beginning. My dad started giving her a sales talk when he first met her. Told her what a great guy I was. Not to believe what she saw, but just to believe that I really was a nice guy. Well, my dad was a hard-working lawyer, and we spent some spare time. He did spent time teaching us how to do things, how to do repairs and fix things. He was always a fix-it guy. He grew up on the farm. So on the farm you have to know how to repair everything. So he was, and my mother too. My mother was a painter and fixer, and she did all the painting inside the house, and she was always up on ladders and trimming things. Even when she was in her late 80s, she was dragging stuff around the yard, even into her 90s. So they were always do-it-yourself people. I don't know how hard they were on me. They weren't really strict. We never had a babysitter. From the time I was 5 years old, they didn't go out very much. But if they went out, we were left alone. We never did anything bad, except my brother taught me how to take gasoline and line it on the ground and light fire to it. But we never burned anything up, fortunately. And I know when they'd go out, we would listen to the radio. We weren't supposed to listen to the radio. And they would come home and put their hand on the radio and feel it was hot, and we got yelled at for that. But we were allowed to ride our bicycles down a main road at night, and we're allowed out in the boat and went for miles by ourselves when we were 10 years old. Camped overnight by ourselves. So they weren't really strict.
That's crazy.
They wanted us to make good grades. If we didn't make good grades, we were in trouble. So we had to study.
Do you remember ever coming home with probably not, with a bad grade? And your parents' reaction?
No, didn't happen.
Do you think you ever got a B in your life?
I got 1 B plus at the University of Florida in English. That was my bad subject, was English. I was always good in the sciences. I could always ace the sciences. And I had a B plus in tennis.
How'd you get a B plus in tennis?
I don't know, I guess I wasn't any good.
That's funny. Did you ever get a B in medical school?
We didn't have grades in medical school.
Oh, you didn't?
Never saw our grades.
Huh.
Yeah, they de-emphasized grading.
That's
So
kind of cool.
I don't know what grades I had in med school.
That's kind of cool.
Oh, from the time I was 5 years old, my mother always reminded me that I wanted to be a doctor. So that was subliminal, I think. Anybody asked me what I wanted to be, my mother probably answered before I did. Oh, he's going to be a doctor. So that was foregone. In fact, my earliest memory was might not even have been 5 years old. I probably might have been 4.5. Was in DeLand, and I was watching a Labor Day parade, and there were some people carrying a stretcher with a victim on it, and they had their Red Cross badges on it, and I had my mouth open and said, "Ooh, that's what I want to do." And I remember my mother about that point saying, "Yeah, that's what you want to do. You want to be a doctor." So, talk about subliminal. And about that time, I clearly remember this, that same parade. I said, "I'm thirsty." She said, well, there's water over there at the gas station. So I go over and I start to get water. And she said, oh no, that's the colored water. And I said, well, yeah, that's what I want, is I want colored water. No, you need the white water. I don't want white water, I want the colored water. And I had a hard time understanding. And I'm not sure what explanation I got, but they forced me to drink the white water. It was a 1934 Chevrolet that we got it for $25, and we tore all the fenders off, stripped all the metal off, and tore the doors off, and we rode around like that, just a jalopy.
How old were you? Do you remember?
That would have been 1950, so I would have been 15.
Was there the same like procedure to get your license as there is nowadays? Like you get your learner's permit at 15?
No, I think you got your learner's permit at 14.
Okay.
And got your regular license at 16. But if you were on the farm, you could drive a tractor at 12. How do I handle stress? I guess stress handles me. I'm pretty good at stress. I think I'm pretty cool under. I think if there's an emergency, I know there are 3 different types of people. If there's an emergency situation, there's a small number of people that go towards the emergency, but the vast majority of people run away from it, and then there are about 20% that freeze, that don't do anything. I'm the one that goes toward it. I don't know. I'm not a surprise guy. I don't remember. What would I surprise you with? I don't know.
Okay, I'll ask you again once you think about it. Okay. What is your dream for your children and grandchildren?
I want them to be well educated and happy and healthy. My grandparents were all farmers. The Raymond grandparents had the house there in Garrison, the schoolhouse that they moved up the road and they lived in until they died. The Fry grandparents, my mother's parents, had lived in Van Horn. My grandmother Fry died much younger. She died about 1940 or so. And Grandpa Fry lived another 15 years after that. But I never knew him when he was working. He was always retired. Lived in that big house, always with some family there, because there was always family visiting, because he had 8 children. So there were always children there visiting. Most of them lived in Van Horn, so there were always children there visiting him. But the Frys and the Raymonds were all farmers, all hardworking people.
Do you think that's kind of where you got your work ethic from?
Oh, sure it is, yeah. First pet was an Eskimo Spitz. We named him Dodo.
What's an Eskimo Spitz?
We had him in DeLand, and then he moved to Tallahassee with us. And when my dad went into the Navy, we had to leave him in Tallahassee, and somebody was taking care of him up there. And he was killed, I think, by a wildcat. A wildcat got a hold of him and killed him.
Is that a type of cat, dog? An Eskimo Spitz?
No, or something like, well, it's a large, well, I don't know, they knew for sure what it was, but it was some big animal, big enough to attack him and kill him, because he was a big dog.
Oh, a dog, okay.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Dodo.
Dodo, okay.
Oh, they were just having the kids come around and watch them and tease them and just having them visit. I remember the first time I looked at the internet, I didn't really know what the internet was. And I didn't know what a browser was. So first time I tried to get on the internet, I didn't have a browser. So I don't know how I was messing around, and I had addresses that I was putting in there, and I was getting all kinds of garbage. And eventually I got on, and then I went to the computer store, and they said, oh, you got to have a browser. I said, a what? And he taught me what I had to have, and then I had to got the first browser I had. Oh, I forget the name of it.
So is that something you had to like install on your computer separately, a browser?
Yeah, you had to install that separately. The first browser I had started with a P. At any rate, when I got this browser, and the first computer I had here, we had a dinner party one night, and I was showing off how smart I was about computers. And I said, look at this. I said, let's get on the internet. And I said, look at here what we can do. And I brought up this, it was you had to pick the 10 games of the week, football games. You had to pick the winners of 10 football games. So I went quickly through it and picked the ones that I thought would likely win. I remember Wisconsin was one of them, and at that time, Wisconsin hadn't won a game in 3 years. So I just picked Wisconsin and picked all the others, and then forgot about it. It wasn't any money involved. You just put your name in and your address and your email address, I guess, and then forgot about it. About a month later, I get a registered letter. It says, you are the grand prize winner. And I'm thinking, yeah, I gotta go buy a condo or something. So I threw it in the trash and I went out to play golf. And when I got home, there was a message on the phone that said, hey, why didn't you call us? Because it was a registered letter. I said, all right. So I called them. I said, what is this? I gotta come and listen to you give a spiel about condos? They said, no. You were the nationwide grand prize winner of our football contest. I said, what? He said, yeah. You get 2 airline tickets to whatever bowl you want to go to, and you get tickets to the bowl on the 50-yard line. You get tickets to the parade, and you get tickets to a big New Year's Eve party, $500 cash, 5 nights in a hotel, and everything, all expenses paid. I said, and your grandma was standing there. She went running out to the garbage can and came back with it. I said, okay. I said, I want to go to the Rose Bowl. They said, okay, you got it. So we went to the Rose Bowl. But it's evolved since then. And in those days, the connections were very slow. The connections were all by phone, and it was like 300 bits per second.
So how long did it take? How long did it take your football clicker thing to load?
To get that message through with the 10 games was probably 10 minutes.
That's crazy.
That's how I remember it. It was just a long, long time.
Yeah.
And then the next step that happened was we didn't have any high-speed internet in this neighborhood. But across the lake at your Uncle Bob's, it's a mile across the lake, Uncle Bob had high-speed internet, which is about 10 times the speed of what I had. And we've set up, your dad set up for me a Pringles can for a receiver, and we had a transmitter over at Uncle Bob's house. So he connected and he transmitted a signal across to me, so I could get that.
With a Pringles can?
With a Pringles can, so-called high-speed internet.
What?
Which
That's
was
insane.
like.
How did my dad know to do that?
Now, right now, I'm getting 300 megabytes per second, and that was that 300 million bytes per second. I was probably getting 300.
Yeah, something like that.
300 bytes per second.
That's crazy.
So it's like 1,000,000 times faster now than what it was transmitting across the lake, and 10 million times faster than what I was getting on the phone. That would have been about 1970. At that time, there was a paramedic unit in Miami, and there was another one, I think it was in Seattle, and we were the third one. And Palm Beach a bunch of the Palm Beach people had gotten together and raised money to start a unit, and they asked me to educate the people that were going to to run the unit. So we had a group of 10 paramedics that used to come to my office every day. And we did that for about 3 months. They would come to my office and then they would go to the hospital and they were working with some of the nurses there. So we taught them as much as we could about what it took to handle emergency patients. So we started up from scratch with that, and with those 10 people, then it gradually expanded after that. But we were the third unit in the United States. They had one big ambulance that they bought that the Palm Beach people paid for. Well, it was similar to the ones they have now. But it was a big, fully modern, fully equipped unit.
Yeah. What were the big things that you focused on, like kind of teaching them? I feel like that's kind of hard to explain because there's so much, but I'm curious.
Well, mainly I taught them how to take care of cardiac patients, patients with heart attacks or cardiac arrest, but then we dealt also with bleeding and breathing problems and resuscitation and how to deal with shock and heart rhythm problems and how to administer oxygen and instill an airway and how to recognize if anybody was in distress.
So, were you a cardiologist?
Yes.
Is that, did you do surgery ever?
I used to do pacemakers,
Okay.
but I didn't do any other surgery. I didn't
Okay.
do any real interventional surgery like they do now.
So what is the main thing you do as a cardiologist?
Main thing in my day was to treat heart attacks.
Okay.
Nowadays, they do all sorts of things. They put stents into arteries, they dilate arteries, and they have more advanced techniques for treating shock, and they deal with congestive heart failure with resynchronization and all sorts of modern pacemaker techniques.
That's cool. Okay, let me think of anything else before I let you go. This is a good one. What's the best gift you've ever received? The best gift you've ever received.
What would it be was to save your money now and invest it wisely so you can retire early and travel around the world when you're my age.
Pretty good advice. Okay.
I should tell you this story about your great-grandmother. They started traveling when they were in their 80s. They hadn't done much traveling before that. And they went everywhere. They went to Antarctica. They went to Nepal. In her 80s, she was riding elephants in Nepal. Went all over China and the Far East, South America. Well, I can't think of any place they didn't go. My dad was always wanting to travel. She was wanting just to go along. So one day when she was in her 90s, we said, "Mom, what was your favorite trip?" She said, "All those trips are made. My favorite was to go to Epcot." I can't think of anything I would have probably done any differently. It's really worked out pretty lucky for me.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to be able to say.
Well, mostly my brother and I were being in the same class and dating girls probably that were pretty much the same age. We would usually double date together, and we would we didn't go in that jalopy, but we borrowed our mother's car, and we would date together. We'd go to movies, and occasionally there'd be a dance. And then we would go to youth fellowship on Sunday nights. But mostly it was going to the movies and then stopping for a milkshake on the way home. That was about it.
That's cool.
Well, let's see. If I had it to do over again, I'd probably take that parachute jump that you took. I'd probably do some dangerous things that I wouldn't do now, but There's some places I would have gone on an African safari. I would probably climb Mount Kilimanjaro like your cousin Mark is doing right now. Might have gone to Antarctica. If I hadn't gotten married, I would have, when I got out of the service, I would have, one of our buddies, that when he got out of the service, he took a year to travel around the world. That would have been fun. But you can't do that if you get married and have children.
Yeah.
I guess my parents, more than anything, they really guided me toward going to med school and guided me towards learning how to do things for myself. To work hard and study hard, and become a do-it-yourselfer, learn how to save and how to invest. That's about it. Oh, got to think about that one.
It's a tough one.
Biggest life lesson. I guess the biggest life lesson would be to learn from your mistakes. Because I haven't always. I remember one time I had a patient described a peculiar syndrome, a peculiar collection of symptoms that he had. And I said, wow, that is really interesting. I've never heard of anything like that, but that's really interesting. He said, yeah, that's what you told me last year. So I've tried to remember my mistakes and tried to learn from them. It's not always easy to make it the way it used to be. I guess I would like to have it to where we didn't have to worry about crime. Because in my day, we didn't have to worry about locking things up. We didn't lock our cars. We could leave our keys and leave our belongings in the car. Didn't worry about anybody stealing anything. Left the house open, didn't lock the house. But now you can't even leave your car in the driveway. And that's universal. It's not just, it's everywhere. Why that's happened, I don't know. So I wish it were the way it were in the 50s, to where we didn't have to worry about crime so much. We didn't see the black people anywhere. And everywhere we went, we didn't see black people. Particularly when I grew up in Daytona. We lived on the island of Daytona Beach, which is like Palm Beach. Rarely ran into kids of other nationalities, other races. I remember one time playing golf, there was a kid out that was one of the caddies, was out in the woods looking for golf balls, and I was looking for golf balls also, because I was never allowed to have a new golf ball. I had to find my golf balls. And so we were both looking for the same old beat up golf balls, and I got to talking to him, and I said, where do you go to school? He said, I go to the school over on the west side. I said, what grade are you in? He said, I'm a 10th grade senior. I said, what do you mean you're a 10th grade senior? He said, yeah, I graduated this year. We only go 10 years. So we always said it was separate but equal, but it wasn't. The black schools, they got our used textbooks. They only went 10 years instead of 12. When they finished 10 years, they went to work. Nobody went to college. So it was a serious difference in education. And that didn't change until 1967 or so, when we desegregated, made a huge difference for the black population. We had a segregated hospital here until 1955. It was called the Pine Ridge Hospital. It was not a good hospital at all. It was right close to the White Hospital, right close to Good Samaritan Hospital. But it closed down in 1955. But before that, the black people all had to go to Pine Ridge. They didn't go to Good Samaritan or St. Mary's.
It's crazy.
Hugely different, and the schools were all white or all black. Was no mixture. The thing that was really bad is when, I think, when they ended segregation, the white people all started going to private schools. If they had just kept it the way it was and allowed integration to take place, it would have made a huge difference. But all the white people abandoned the public school and went to the white private school. So they essentially still had segregation. But the white people started paying for private education.
It's crazy.
Only that the black people then started coming to the white hospitals, and gradually more and more white people started going to the public schools. But nothing really. There weren't any protests or fights or anything. Not in the area I was. There wasn't any animosity or any. There weren't any fights anywhere. Just to work hard and be honest and love your neighbors and help the people that need help.